Okay, look, I'm sorry. We're going to have to talk about Ezra Klein, and I'm sorry because I know I did just write a very long review of his book Abundance, which he co-wrote with Derek Thompson. I also did a long video adapting that review of Abundance. That review was not positive, and it was very in-depth, so I feel like I've dealt with Ezra Klein's ideas at considerable length, and I don't want this to end up the way that my disagreement with the rationalist writer Sam Harris ended up, which concluded with him calling me mentally unwell.
Okay, so then there was this article I noticed in this online journal, maybe it's also a print journal, called Current Affairs, which I hesitate to mention because the editor over there strikes me as someone who is truly mentally unwell, given some of the insane things he's written about me and the length at which he's written them.
Although I will point out I'd only co-written one article, but admittedly it was very, very long. I do think it holds up, though, and Sam Harris never convincingly responded to any of the arguments we made, just saying. Look, there are more things in heaven and earth than Ezra Klein's bad opinions, and I promise that after this, there will be a moratorium on Klein criticism from today until some reasonable point in the future. But look, I have to protest here because Ezra Klein has lately published 2 pieces of material, a column and a podcast, and they not only irk me, but they are usefully illustrative of a particular kind of politics that I think we have to avoid if we want to successfully stop the country's slide into authoritarianism. So by examining them and understanding why they're so misguided, we can ourselves avoid becoming like Ezra Klein, hand-wringing accomplices to the right, sanitizing their propaganda for them. So first, in the aftermath of Charlie Kirk's murder, Klein published a column praising Kirk, and he wrote, "You can dislike much of what Kirk believed, and the following statement is still true. Kirk was practicing politics in exactly the right way. He was showing up to campuses, talking with anyone who'd talk to him. He was one of the era's most effective practitioners of persuasion." Now, there is, first, an annoying arrogance to the statement. Now, this is an opinion piece, but he doesn't present it as a mere opinion that Kirk was practicing politics the exact right way. He says that's just a true statement. Like, it's something everyone could agree on, whether you held Kirk's beliefs or not. But there's room for a huge amount of disagreement here. Numerous commentators replied and pointed out that Charlie Kirk actually practiced politics in a pretty horrible way. He had a closed mind, nasty bigotries, and his conversations with anyone who would talk to him were not really attempts to achieve genuine understanding, but they were opportunities to generate viral YouTube clips of him owning young people. And during the pandemic, medical experts spoke out against Kirk's misinformation campaigns. While Charlie Kirk warned viewers Joe Biden was sending goons door to door to make you take a COVID-19 vaccine. And the leader of Columbia University's Pandemic E-Source and Recovery Initiative noted Kirk was an unabashed promulgator of egregiously false information about the dangers of vaccination, adding, "He probably knows better, but he actively chooses to misinform." Charlie Kirk's turning point organizations were a dark money network that skirted campaign finance laws and was fined by the Federal Election Commission over its lack of transparency. Kirk started a McCarthyite public shaming list of professors, which is searchable with tags like LGBTQ, racial ideology, and terror supporter. He even funneled dark money into student government elections on college campuses in order to try and stack student councils with right-wingers. This is a man who literally wanted to rig and corrupt the student body election system. He said it might seem like kind of a silly thing to try and take over student government associations, but the only vulnerability there is, the only little opening, is student government association races and elections. So we're investing a lot of time and energy and money in it. So that's practicing politics the right way, is it, Ezra Klein? Now look, in Ezra Klein's defense, he doesn't actually seem to know anything about Charlie Kirk. Ta-Nehisi Coates noted in a response in Vanity Fair that there was not a single word in Klein's piece from Charlie Kirk himself. He quoted nothing, perhaps because if Klein had actually quoted Kirk, he would have had to confront the fact that, as Coates says, quote, "Kirk reveled in open bigotry. Indeed, claims of Kirk's civility are tough to square with his penchant for demeaning members of the LGBTQ+ community as freaks, referring to trans people with the slur tranny. He defined the American way of life as marriage, home ownership, and child rearing free of the lesbian, gay, transgender garbage in their school, adding that he did not want kids to have to hear the Muslim call to prayer 5 times a day. Kirk habitually railed against black crime, claiming that prowling blacks go around for fun to go target white people. He repeated the rape accusations against Yusuf Salam, a member of the exonerated Central Park Five, who is now a New York City councilman, calling him a disgusting pig who'd gotten away with gang rape. Whatever distaste Kirk held for blacks was multiplied when he turned to those from Haiti. Haiti was, by Kirk's lights, a country infested with demonic voodoo, where migrants were raping your women and hunting you down at night. Now, Coates points out that Kirk's rampant bigotry permeated throughout his institution, Turning Point USA. Within its ranks, staff members felt no need to dilute their true feelings about minorities, again, to quote Coates. Crystal Clanton, the group's former national field director, once texted a fellow Turning Point employee, "I hate black people. Like, fuck them all." In 2022, after 3 black football players were killed in another college, Meg Miller, president of Turning Point's chapter at the University of Missouri, joked in a social media message that if they would have killed 4 more N-words, we would have had the whole week off. So then what does Ezra Klein mean exactly when he says Charlie Kirk was doing politics the right way? Well, he appears to mean only that Kirk didn't throw bombs at people. He didn't shoot people, that he advanced his political agenda using words and, of course, money, rather than violence. But by that standard, David Duke was also practicing politics the right way when he decided the Ku Klux Klan should put on suits and ties and join the Republican Party rather than carrying out lynchings. It's certainly true that it's better to be nonviolent than violent, but it's also true that many of those who practice politics with words are not entirely nonviolent insofar as they are trying to attain control over the government in order to enforce their political preferences using the threat of state violence. Letters to the New York Times about Ezra Klein's column showed that many readers understood how absurd this argument was. One was from a professor targeted by Turning Point's professor watch list, who had personal reasons for thinking this was not the right way to do politics. She said many of her colleagues now hesitate to speak or write publicly because of the tactics used by Mr. Kirk and those he inspired, adding that many faculty members have been doxxed and threatened. Another pointed out that in his vaunted debates, Charlie Kirk dealt almost exclusively in bad faith arguments, distorting facts and bringing up the irrelevant, often employing rhetorical tactics to verbally and emotionally dominate his opponent. Now, Ezra Klein, in a subsequent podcast, did not seem to have learned anything from the critics of his column. He doubled down, saying,
"You can disagree with virtually everything Kirk believed about politics. You can detest some of what he believed about politics and still believe that he was there on that stage, practicing politics the right way."
But Klein's defense here hinges on the ambiguity of his headline. If by practicing politics, we're referring solely to the act of showing up and giving talks and doing Q&As, then yes, he was doing it the right way. But if we're referring to the totality of what Kirk did, then he very much was not doing it the right way, because we should practice a politics of empathy and care. Now, Klein points out that he feels a special bond with Charlie Kirk.
But I find myself grieving for him because I recognize some commonality with him. He was murdered for participating in our politics. Somewhere beyond how much divided us, there was something that bonded us too. Some effort to change this country in ways that we think are good.
But once again, so was David Duke. Everyone in political history, even Hitler, even Mao, is engaged in some effort to change their country in ways they think are good. To want to change your country is not inherently deserving of respect. If you want to change it in ways that are horrifying, well, no, I don't feel any commonality or bond with you just because we both hold beliefs. I think those beliefs are good. Every single person on the planet thinks their beliefs are good and right. That's what believing in something means. We can imagine Ezra Klein during the American Civil War. I feel a bond with Jefferson Davis because while we may have our disagreements, we're both engaged in efforts to change our country in ways we think are good. Now, the tendency here to downplay the actual stakes of politics, to see comity as more important than substantive consequences, That's fully on display in Ezra Klein's follow-up to the Kirk column, which is a friendly podcast with our old friend Ben Shapiro. Now, Shapiro is a racist. He says Arabs like to bomb crap and live in open sewage. He's put considerable effort into defending the genocide of Palestinians, and his latest book, which we reviewed in Current Affairs, is a horrifying descent into the moral abyss, dividing the world into good noble lions and parasitic scavengers. It's a reductive, dehumanizing framework, and it's reminiscent of fascist language about Übermenschen and Untermenschen, and sets the stage for acts of brutal violence. We must destroy the scavengers before they destroy us, etc. So does Ezra Klein in this conversation aggressively challenge Shapiro over his factual errors, over his genocide support, over his childish worldview? No, he lightly pushes back on Shapiro, but he gives him plenty of space to expound on his horrifying worldview. He certainly doesn't give him the kind of aggressive grilling that Ben Shapiro would get if he ever did come on the Current Affairs podcast. And Ben Shapiro, there's still a standing invitation for you. It's a completely maddening conversation that Ezra Klein has with Ben Shapiro. He politely disagrees with much of what Shapiro says, but he also asks him a great many open-ended questions. What's the difference between being a conservative and a counter-revolutionary? How do you define Western civilization? What's the lions versus scavengers framework doing for you? Compare with a decade ago, are you more or less comfortable on the right? Now, these simply allow Ben Shapiro to spout his noxious worldview at length before Klein asks for elaboration or poses a lightly challenging question. So even as Shapiro bashes Palestine protesters, explaining the reason there are queers for Palestine is that both LGBT people and pro-Palestine activists are scavengers in his framework, Ezra Klein doesn't point out how outrageous that is, or explain the reality of the Gaza genocide or LGBT oppression. Having Ben Shapiro on is a perfect opportunity to confront him with the basic findings of all the international human rights groups that Israel is committing a genocide, and to challenge him to explain how genocide victims are scavengers exactly. But Ezra Klein treats Ben Shapiro with a seriousness that his atrocious half-baked ideas don't deserve. Now look, I am all for engaging intellectually with the right. I actually wrote a whole book. It's called Responding to the Right, Brief Replies to 25 Conservative Arguments. And I do this meticulously in there. I go through all of their arguments and I engage with them. I take them seriously and I refute them. I show why they're wrong and you shouldn't believe them. I'm also a pacifist who deplores all political violence, although I'm actually consistent in that I care just as much about victims of US violence abroad as about the death of a right-wing political commentator. All murder is to be condemned consistently. So I agree entirely with Ezra Klein that political disagreement should be carried out through argument and persuasion rather than by beating up or shooting our enemies. But I also believe in being forceful and honest and committed to humane principles. And honesty means telling the truth about Charlie Kirk's odious views, even as we fully denounce his murder. Forceful commitment to principle means when you have someone with hideous beliefs like Ben Shapiro sitting there in your studio, you have an obligation to confront him on his lies and bigotry and not treat him with kid gloves. Ezra Klein is actually a bad advertisement for a politics of discourse and engagement, because he suggests that it involves being weak in our confrontations with white supremacy and genocide. But it doesn't need to. We can be aggressive champions of the dispossessed while still using argument and rhetoric as our weapons. That is practicing politics the right way. So you're used to hearing me tell you to subscribe to the print edition of Current Affairs, and you should subscribe to the print edition of Current Affairs, but today, I want to talk to you about someone else you should support, because there are friends over at the Majority Report. I find it really, really hard to find intelligent, informed commentary on the news. There's so much bullshit in the world. And we've gotten to know and become friends with the Majority Report because just really respect the work that they do over there. Sam and Emma and the staff there do fantastic research. They know what they're talking about. They focus on important topics. I've been on their show, and, at a time when so many supposedly independent media outlets are compromised by outside interests, they're not, we're not, and so we stick together. Majority Report is really a beacon of genuine free thought. So we are delighted to partner with them. Their kind of outlet is really rare and special and needs to be supported. And so they've agreed to give our readers a deal on memberships there, and we're giving their listeners, in exchange, a deal on current affairs subscription. So they are offering, Majority Report with Sam Seder, offering discount rate for membership there to all current affairs readers, $5 a month for 6 months, and you can use the code current affairs at checkout. And so your membership there keeps the Majority Report possible. It'll give you access to their daily fun half, to all bonus content, commercial free, 5 days a week, first access to discounted live show tickets, first access to limited run merch. So if you join with that special discounted rate, you can support the Majority Report with Sam Seder. They are unbought and unbossed. And as I say, just personally, we really like them. We really respect them. And it's been great to get to work with them. So support current affairs, read current affairs, but also support all independent left media. And Majority Report is a great example of that.